Even as Chicago takes heat from police critics and the president, the nation's third largest city, with its second highest black population, will make a symbolic break in 3 days, electing a black woman to run it for the very first time. Squared up in Tuesday's mayoral runoff is Lori Lightfoot, former head of the Chicago Police Board, against Toni Preckwinkle, president of the Cook County Board of Commissioners. The latest poll out of Chicago has Lightfoot leading 53% to 17%. With nearly 30% of voters undecided going into the election day. As I mentioned at the top of the show, I'm in Chicago, where earlier I was honored by the Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition. He and I also met with both candidates as he called for civility, as for the rhetoric and the personal attacks that have escalated from both camps ahead of Tuesday's historic vote. Joining me now is the Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder and president of Rainbow Push Coalition, and Lynn Sweet, veteran Chicago Sun-Times Washington bureau chief. Glad to have you with us. And thank you for the honor today. Before I go to you and Lynn on the local politics, Wednesday is the 51st anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, who mentored you as you have many of us. You were there in Memphis with Dr. King when he was assassinated. Assess to us what you see today, 51 years later, in the achieving of Dr. King's goals and those of you that continued that and then raised the generations behind.
Beside public accommodations, his signature work was the right to vote. We've seen a magnificent change in America since that time. In the last, from the balcony in Memphis, Tennessee, back in the White House where President Obama stood, that 40 years of wilderness. We've seen under Trump, he's a kind of moral darkness, but the light has been shining so brightly. There are 19 African-American women judges in Houston, Texas, for example. In Chicago, a place where it seemed to be intractable, you have an African-American mayor Tuesday, African-American state's attorney, and state's attorney general, and lieutenant governor, and secretary of state, and city treasurer, and county clerk. Magnificent growth because of the vote and coalitions. Now the gap between the have and have-nots has gotten wider. More people are working, but if you're working but can't afford a decent house, or can't send your child to school, or can't get health care, you need more than work, you need cost of living. And so there's been tremendous increase since Dr. King. When I watched Clemson play Alabama in the big football game, in California, Clemson, I remember when Harvard began, went to Clemson, had to go with federal guards. When schools in South Carolina, federal guards, Gant in Clemson, and then in South Carolina. And now these guys are on the tops because black and white are playing and learning to play together. And I think we may often underestimate the impact of athletics in this season because learn that the big game where you choose uniform color over skin color, direction, not complex, there's something dynamic occurring in spite of a kind of moral darkness coming from the White House.
You had today both of the two candidates that will be, one of will be elected the mayor of Chicago on Tuesday, and you had them sign pledges, and I signed as a witness, that they would deal with less acrimony, personal attacks. Has been very bitter.
Well, they may have those, but the election is over Tuesday night. The healing must begin on Wednesday morning. I've asked them to sign a pledge. In effect, they will have a joint press conference on Wednesday morning. Let's let the healing begin process. If the polls set up as you projected from yesterday, if Lori Lightfoot becomes mayor based upon that projection, and Toni is the county chairman and the Cook County Democratic Party chairman, they'll be working in the same bill. They must work together. City and county must work together to make government work, and it will work. They must be determined to end. There's been a hot battle in the last few days.
Lynn, is this a Chicago thing, or is this particularly acrimonious to you?
No, and good luck, Reverend Jackson, because you know we have unity breakfasts after hard campaigns all the time, and it is a beginning, not the end of a healing process. And you know, Lori Lightfoot and Toni Preckwinkle are going to share a fifth floor of the joined Cook County City Hall building. It's one building, and they're going to just make it work, even if they don't like each other for a while. Rahm Emanuel, the current mayor, and Toni Preckwinkle are not particularly close, and they kind of have a working agreement. So I think the city has more problems than whether or not how much and how well Toni Preckwinkle and Lori Lightfoot get along. If Lightfoot is elected mayor, as it seems that's a trajectory that it's on right now.
Al, it's interesting that it's kind of like Obama and Hillary, in the sense that Hillary ran on experience, Barack ran on change. Preckwinkle was running on experience, and Lightfoot was running on change. Because she has been successful in politics, Preckwinkle, Fourth Ward Committeeman, and Cook County Chair, and Cook County Democratic Chair.
Well, I want to point that out for our, if I could just take a pause. I know, Reverend Sharpen, you introduced Preckwinkle as the Cook County Board Chair, but for somebody who started in the liberal politics of a Chicago South Side neighborhood called Hyde Park, she evolved into a political boss. She's also the chair of the Cook County Democratic Party. That makes you a boss of what's left of the machine. So I don't know if it's so much, it's not just the establishment versus an outsider, because Lori Lightfoot worked within City Hall and worked for Rahm. So it's been positioned more, if I could just suggest that Lori Lightfoot is being accused by Preckwinkle of being a corporate lawyer. She says it as if it's a slur. And so Lori Lightfoot shoots back that she's a boss. And that's the framing of it, when in fact both of these women hold very progressive political and governmental policies.
Yeah, but as the scenario unfolds, Preckwinkle has been saddled with being the political machine. And to that extent, you inherit an awful lot. She inherits relationship with Ed Burke, who right now is on a downward trajectory. Well, there's been a lot of acrimony this week about the Millett trial and how quickly he was dismissed, which is typical of prosecutorial discretion. In the case of Juan McDonald, where a kid was shot 16 times, covered 400 days to expend over an election, the killer got 81 days. Kevin killed his Pendleton got 84 years. And so these kind of emotional charges and disparities have seeped into this election big time.
Let me bring it up from Chicago a minute. You ran for president twice. It was groundbreaking and historic. How do you look at this field? Many of them will join us this week at NAN's convention, as you will be one of the speakers. What do you see in the field, and what do you hope these candidates bring to the American public?
They all have a sensitivity to gender equality, and that matters very much. To racial justice, to inner city development, because the votes are increasingly coming from ex-slave states. Black votes maturing, women vote, Latino votes emerging, so there's a new dynamic. You know, coming out of the Selma movement, a new majority emerged. Blacks couldn't vote, white women couldn't serve on juries, 18-year-olds couldn't vote. You couldn't vote by language, you couldn't vote on campuses. That is now the majority of the country. And when they come together, you elect an Obama twice. That group is maturing now in this vote of power. So I'm impressed. All of them are talking about health care, which is so vital. I think that I resent the idea of calling affordable health care Obamacare. And the design was to put a target and throw targets at it. You have people who are really for affordable health care don't want Obamacare. And that's like one eggs, not one, not one omelet, not one eggs. It just does not make sense. We should stop calling affordable health care Obamacare. It's a fundamental mistake. It plays into the hand of the right wing.
Len, do you think anybody's going to break out of the pack for the presidential run?
Did you ask me that, Reverend?
Yes.
I can. Too soon. I listened to Beto O'Rourke on his announcement speech today, and I didn't hear anything that would add to whatever appeal he has within Democrats. I think you need to let this play out, and that's why some of the major donors for people who need fundraising and can't do it just online, some of them are giving donations to multiple candidates to give seed money. think of it as venture political capital so they could just keep on going for a while and see what happens. Also, with this big field, everyone hasn't been vetted.
Early on, Beto has a certain swagger, a charisma that cannot be ignored. There's great appeal from Kamala Harris, for example, and Joe Biden is there. The question is, can he take the field of change to be radical? He's now having to unveil some of his past, and he has the right credentials, but I'm not sure he has the newness that there's a search for.
Well, we're going to be dealing with it this week. Thank you, Reverend Jesse Jackson. Thank you, Lynn Sweet. Up next,
thank you.
My final thoughts.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.